You're listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by Access U, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Hey, let's do something big. I'm your host, Rachel Schneider. Welcome to the Access Success Podcast, where we highlight important topics focused on education in every form it takes. Now, you may already know from listening to this podcast, if you've been an avid listener, that college enrollment is at an incredible low, and this could have catastrophic consequences on the nation's workforce and just overall economy. However, there are solutions for reaching Gen Z where they are, and that responsibility, especially nowadays, is falling on marketers. A blog from our Vice President Strategic Communications, Rachel Spencer, details exactly how, and that's why she's joining us in the Access U studio today. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Good. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Very good. Great to have you. Can you just dive into it with us and tell us a little bit more about why this issue is such a big deal? Especially recently, people are struggling financially. So why should Gen Z be pursuing a degree?
So before I answer that question, I want to address the bigger question, which I think is at the heart of this entire crisis and why the conversation is changing. And that is, why should Gen Z or anyone pursue an education? It's not even really about the degree, it's about the education. There are so many different options now. It's not, certainly if you want to be a doctor or a psychologist, yes, you should probably be pursuing a degree. But if you want to be a baker, or you like numbers and you want to go into metrology, or you're, like working with your hands, or maybe you want to just be a caregiver, there are so many different options, include from certifications to apprenticeships to associate's degrees. There are more options than ever before, and I think it's really about trying to find and communicate the value of the outcome of whatever path you choose. So for me, it really comes down to the intersection of three things: somebody's passion, their skill, and then how the return that they're going to get on their investment for their education. So, the conversation is changing, and the why comes back to, I think, the heart of the human experience. So that's what's so important. And I think the challenge for marketers right now is to communicate authentically, the value of what they have to offer in terms of the projection of somebody's life. Where are we going to take you? It's no longer about the degree on paper. It's not even about the degree itself or the institution that you went to. It's what are you going to be able to do with it, and where is this going to take your life? So it has to be all outcome driven. So why should anybody be pursuing an education? It's, what are we all about? Continuing to refine our own knowledge and skills to the betterment of ourselves and the betterment of the communities in which they live. And I think that's at the heart of why we're doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. And so how can marketers then shift that strategy, shift their approach to convince students to attend their particular institution? What gives individual institutions that competitive edge?
It's so hard because there's so much more competition now. It used to be, you could kind of segment out your audiences. This is the type of person that was going to go to this institution. And, if you lived here, you were probably going to go here. And, with the demographic cliff and the declining enrollments overall everywhere, everybody's competing for the same students now. So Harvard and the community college down the street, they're competing for the exact same student, which is not something that we've really ever seen before. So how do you stand up against each other? And it comes down to authenticity, especially now in the age where everybody can see right through you, no matter what you're saying. If you are not being authentic as an institution and not doing so much to really talk about the things that make you unique, you're missing the point. Now is not the time to try to be like everybody else or to try to one up and try to keep up with the Joneses. I think for higher education, it's really about, okay, let's hone in on what it is that we offer that nobody else does, whether it's for our community at large or for the country or for this particular industry. You've got to be able to talk about, bringing in things like your faculty and their experiences and the paths that alumni have taken, and then the other side of it too is what students are really looking for is understanding. I think I think Dr. Brow was on this podcast before and talking about the role of social media playing in helping communicate what an experience actually looks like for students. And I think that's the other piece for marketers when they're talking about not only what they have, but what kind of experience can a student expect to receive. So what does a campus look like? What does a classroom look like? What is the skill that they're going to learn? What can they do with it? It's all about visualization and communicating authentically those real value propositions. So I think in the blog, I wrote, there are some community colleges now that are bringing in sports teams. Maybe you want to talk about that. Was on a call with a community college a few weeks ago, and they actually are putting in dorm rooms because they serve a very rural, spread out community, and it's going to be easier for students to come and learn with them if they can come in and stay a little while. So things like that, look for the unique stories, I think are going to be really, really important.
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Dean Brow, I'm glad you brought him up, because one of the things he tries to emphasize especially is listening first, especially on social media, of course. And so how can marketing professionals at institutions learn from their audience first and make sure that they are in tune with what their audience and what Gen Z or what prospective students of any age may really need from them?
I think it comes down to breaking down silos. So we can't, as marketers, speak authentically and truthfully to our audiences in a way that's going to resonate with them if we don't engage them in conversation. So that can be through social media and just listening to the conversations that are taking place. But there are also so many opportunities on campus. And, and this goes beyond higher education. I mean, if you're a B2B organization or, you're trying to recruit a labor force or something, bring the people that you're trying to recruit and speak to the table so that you understand how they're receiving messages and what's most likely to resonate. I think higher education especially has a tendency to kind of silo off, here's recruitment, the recruitment or admissions office, and here's our faculty, and here are our students, and here's student services, and everybody's kind of doing their own things. And really, it's about bringing everybody to the table so ideas are being shared, and so you can come up with a different approach to talking to students in a way that is going to be appealing to them.
And speaking their language.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm 40 years old. How am I going to speak to somebody who is 18 or 22 if I don't talk to them and understand? I mean, I know that I don't use emojis the right way, like things like that. So, I think there's value in learning the lived experiences of the people that you're trying to communicate with and just talking to them. And there's so many different ways to do that. And if you haven't found a way, then you're not trying hard enough to be, honest. And that sounds harsh, but, bringing together groups on campus, facilitating communities, facilitating opportunities to bring different people to the table intentionally, just to listen and hear their thoughts. And that gives you so much rich content and rich information to use in marketing moving forward. So, that you're resonating and you're saying what needs to be said.
And obviously, these marketing and public relations projects are going to take a team of people. So what should that team look like when institutions are building their team to combat this problem? What roles and responsibilities need to be accounted for?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it goes back to what I just said. It's about breaking down silos. So when it comes to recruitment is marketing right now. They're almost indistinguishable. So you have to, with your recruitment strategy, you have to have your communications and marketing team on the board, and that should be a given. But also, bring in the faculty, bring in alumni, bring in student services, bring in some sort of representation from everywhere. And that includes, if you have somebody working in the DEIB space, making sure that they're, heard, because it comes down to making sure that all your audiences are feeling heard and feeling that they belong. And so if you're missing a person or a department or representation at the table when these decisions are being made, then you're probably missing out on an important message that you need to be communicating.
Yeah. And as the recruitment department and the marketing department are molding into one, or they may already be molded dependent on, the college or the university, how can they prepare students? What types of activities can they offer, things that they can offer in the office that would be beneficial?
So I think working with career services to connect students to post-education opportunities in real, tangible, hands-on ways, looking for helping them find jobs and internships. And that works to further your marketing, because then you're creating community-based connections or industry-based connections. So you're fueling opportunities for students to connect outside of the campus environment or the online environment if they're learning online. So using sort of that practical approach to help students establish their careers so that they know that when they come to you, they're not just going to get a skill or an education, they're going to get results, because that's really what students are looking for.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about dual enrollment and just the role that families also play in this department? Because I know when we spoke to Monica Gomez and she was talking particularly about Hispanic enrollment for first-gen students, they just feel so welcomed when somebody on the college or university staff is bilingual and can actually talk to the parents who may not speak English or may not be, as proficient in a lot of the different, college and university lingo that they may be using. So what value does that bring, especially when we're talking about reaching students at the high school level?
I think dual enrollment is such a unique opportunity that is so exclusive to community college experience. And that's really where, they can really shine, because one, they're helping to change the conversation with younger demographics and their parents that community colleges offer just as much value as a traditional four-year school. And it's also introducing parents and their students to what the college experience is like early on. When we've spoken with high school students before who have been in dual enrollment, the biggest value that they see is not so much in the education, it's just that they feel more confident going into their future because they're able to experience what, a college course is like, and they know a little bit more about how they can approach critical thinking in terms of making decisions on what they want to do after they graduate from high school. I think they sign on to dual enrollment for, just to get the college credits, and then they come away with a much more confident and robust understanding of how everything works, and they can make smarter decisions that work for them. And many of them end up staying at community college or doing something, learning that they don't need a four-year degree. They can go out and they can do something else in the community.
And what concerns are we seeing among international students that are affecting enrollment?
Yeah, well, I know, for sure there's a huge decline in international students even coming into the U.S. It used to be that so many people I think it peaked in 2018 or 2019, the United States was seen as, the educational center of the world, and this is where you came for a good education. And that number is dropping dramatically. And part of that is because COVID. So we had a lot of people who just weren't traveling and coming in. But we're also seeing a lot of other countries, really amp up their own educational spaces. So there's more competition globally for that. But then it also comes down to, again, that word belonging. And so when we've spoken to international students, they're looking for opportunities, but when they come on a college campus, they don't have the support that they need, or maybe English is a second language, or, their parents don't speak English, so they have a trouble communicating the value to their parents. So it comes down to how are you working as an institution to create a space that is welcoming, where international students and any type of student feels as though they belong and that they have a place on your campus. And I think that's just amplified with the international student experience, because they're coming from different countries and they're coming from different cultures, and to come on and to try to find a space and come on and feel comfortable with a college that is not making the effort to really understand their experience, they're quickly deciding that it's not worth their time and they can go out and do something else.
And we do know that international travel, period, has been affected by the COVID pandemic. So how can universities and colleges make sure that they're being sensitive but also self-aware enough when it comes to the COVID-19 concerns that students and professors and just their community may have? Yeah,
I think we're in an interesting time because everybody feels like they want to be done with the pandemic. I mean, I certainly feel like that.
Yeah.
And, so many things are opening up, but it's, it's been like the last 2 years. As soon as everything starts to open up, you start hearing about new variants and things. So So, it's a tricky situation where we don't want to focus so much on COVID-19 because everybody's ready to move on. But at the same time, don't hide behind that elephant in the room. There are still really very valid concerns about safety of being in person, and also, too, we learned some things in the last years about how to translate education experiences online that really enable more access to education for people. So my hope is that some of the changes that were made in the last 2 years as a response to COVID don't go away just because the pandemic is going into an endemic phase. Online learning, respect for space, and just implementing virtual components to in-person events or in-person classroom, just bring it all together. I think we're going to see a lot more of a hybrid environment, and I hope that continues because it enables everybody to be able to access education in a way that suits them. There are plenty of people that want in-person, and that's how they learn best, and there are also plenty of people through personal preference or life circumstance, they can't make it to an in-person classroom. So I think everything needs to start being hybrid and communicate that you offer those solutions that work for student needs.
With there being so much competition among institutions for students right now, how can they best portray their messaging individually? I mean, what do they need to stick to as far as some best practices when they're developing these marketing and PR plans?
Yeah, really just stick to the facts. Like, what does your school do well? What makes it special? And why should somebody apply there instead of anywhere else? I think we've gotten kind of accustomed to this is what students want to hear when everybody's saying the same thing. And go back to the basics of your institution because there's a reason why you're here in your community or within the industry, and there's value that you offer. So go back to the who, what, where, why, how. It really is that simple. And again, too, work to change the language and understand how students are listening and receiving and processing information. It's not a time to dumb it down, but, really take the time to understand how language is evolving with generations and reflect that back in your marketing. It is really challenging, and not to pick on anybody, but if, you've got somebody that is, a privileged white 55-year-old woman writing copy from her own experience and not taking into account somebody with a completely different background from her, that is noticeable now. It might have been something we could overlook a few years ago, but we can't now. And so making sure that we understand the lived experiences and adjusting copy and language to reflect those core values of your institution are critical.
So just moving on to final thoughts too, if marketers leave with nothing else today, what should they know?
Just focus on communicating the outcome. It is really all about results these days. It's not about your institution. It's about what you're going to be doing for that person. Students have more options than ever before. So communicating that value and focusing on outcome-driven results. That's really what it comes down to. The conversation is shifting from that there is an expectation that you go to college to now there is an expectation that you will think critically about what is the right path for you. And more people are processing that differently, and they're thinking critically, and they're coming up with all kinds of reasons to pursue one path or another. So, if you're not focusing on what you're going to do for that student after they leave, you're missing a huge opportunity. They're going to find somebody where they have a little bit more assurance that they know that they're going to have a career or some sort of certain path moving forward.
Well, thank you, Rachel. And for those listening, you can read our full blog. We come out with new blogs and podcast episodes every week. So head online to accessu.com to check them out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by AccessU, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with what the world of education needs to hear, at AccessU Agency, and connect with us at accessu.com. Let's do something big.